Hi, my name is Aaliyah Price, and I am against the Vocational Rehabilitation Act. The Vocational Rehabilitation Act was created as basically an act of legalizing civil rights for those who are considered disabled or handicapped. So for a lot of people in our country, we do not have to be necessarily mindful of the way we're going to enter a building, the way we're going to um, get out of our vehicles, or maybe when we're writing, worrying about our words flowing on the paper well, or making sure when I speak, my words come out in a certain order, or having issues with paying attention. Um, it can just go on and on, but disabilities can be either physical, or they can be mental, they can be emotional, even in some senses, or even like having a disease such as HIV and AIDS. So basically, even though it is fairly common to know somebody who has some type of disability, even you might not be aware that they have it, because it could be something like dyslexia, or it could be something like some type of illness where they can't write with their hands because their the bones in their fingers or the nerves in their fingers won't allow them to do those things. And like I said, it just varies. But the purpose of this act was to support minorities who have this issue. So it's considered a civil rights matter. And a lot of times when we think of civil rights, we think of the Jim Crow era, we think of Martin Luther King, we think of Rosa Parks, but we don't think about how people who are in wheelchairs at one point, which this is honestly still the case in a lot of situations. You can't just roll a wheelchair into certain places, or you can't just get through doors with crutches, or if it is a situation where you can't see numbers or your words are jumbled, like there just isn't a lot of support for that. And that's part of the reason that this act, even though it was important as start in the beginning, it has not made enough of a change for people who have disabilities or are considered handicapped. So like I said, it was the first step, but that was really all it was. Its purpose was to empower people who have disabilities and promote equality, independence, self-sufficiency, all of that. But how much of that has it really done? I can speak for myself. I haven't worked with anyone who's had a physical disability. Of course, I could have worked with someone who had a more of a mental disability and just not been aware. But as far as physical, I haven't. And that could just be because of different type of jobs I've done. There hasn't been anybody who has a physical disability that was interested. But it also could have honestly been that my company found some way to bypass the affirmative action issue, or found some way to just basically not consider them able to do the job. And that's honestly not fair, because a lot of times people who are minorities, and that could go even beyond disabilities, going into skin color and all of that, are not able to, or not granted equal opportunity. And this act was supposed to grant equal opportunity for these citizens, but it really hasn't. And there have been acts beyond to, so even though this act originally was signed in 1973, there hasn't been too much of a change between then and now. And there have had to be other acts created, like the American Disabilities Act, to try to add to it. But even that, like I'm saying, speaking on now in my life, there just I haven't seen much. And honestly, I don't really think a lot about people who have disabilities. And when I say think a lot, I mean I'm not being considerate of my privilege in being able to go places without having to worry about having extra equipment or whatever to make my life easier. And that's just, I think that's part of just it being I'm really looking for the word, not necessarily normalized to be of the majority, but it's just the fact that we weren't taught in schools how to interact with people or help people or befriend people. And there just really haven't been a lot of, I would say, action to make sure that children are informed, that people are informed, that people consider others who might have disabilities, who might be handicapped. Um, and with this act, even though it was the first step, it really didn't make any substantial progress, which is why Section 504 had to come. But even though that has been more inclusive, it still hasn't been very broad in its changes. And a huge issue with people who have disabilities is discrimination, and this act really does not address discrimination. There have been court cases where they've said that it was basically ruled that I'll quote the Supreme Court in the Southeastern Community College versus Davis held that the line between a lawful refusal to extend affirmative action and illegal discrimination against a person with handicap will not always be clear. And the question just is, how is that fair? So we have these different laws, we have these different acts to support these people, but we aren't really doing much to make it clear. It's like the government is just settling with just not being clear and not trying to do anything to make it better. So, but instead, it just kind of is what it is, and that's why this act is. That's where it struggles. That's where. That's why it's hard to support it. There needs to be more done. You've had like the ADA, American Disabilities Act, come and assist a little bit more with like accessibility and all of that, but still, there's just a lot that needs to be done to assist this population. And I guess the question is, what will it take for it to seem to be important to the government, to the greater society? But there needs to be some other type of legalization that is intentional and much more direct and forceful, aggressive, for lack of better words, to actually provide rights to these people, because this is important. It is important for people to actually feel welcome in the places they go, to feel supported and to feel considered. And we need to have government laws that actually show that we think all people matter.